commitment, and this is typical year over year. And capital, so that's the 1.85 million in capital projects. Plus we have the $120,000 that represents the $10,000 in grants, which goes out to the named health facilities. Oops. As a primary purpose of the regional hospital district, revenue is collected to partially fund capital projects. As is a requirement, Island Health forwarded correspondence on January 15th, which details the 2024-2025 capital plan, of which the Comox Strathcona Regional Health District cost sharing is being requested. So you see that in that letter. There's three types of, three categories in essence of capital projects. On an annual basis, as I've mentioned, the 1.85 million is funded through the operating revenue coming in. During 2023, the announcement was made to construct the 153-bed long-term care facility in Campbell River. The Island Health request for cost sharing includes an additional amount for this facility of just over $2 million. So debt and reserves, just a few quick points. Currently, we have two debts, and I do believe that directors are quite familiar with these two debts. One that's coming due at the end October 2026, so not too much left on that one. And secondly, the larger one, which comes due September 2028. So as the debt comes off, the long-term planning associated with the strategies of the board, we'll see. Well, with that debt coming off, then there'll just be more room there to be able to move forward with your new strategies coming forward. Reserve balances at the end of 2023 will be approximately $28.8 million. By the end of 2024, we expect this to grow to about $30 million. Since part of these funds are for unspent capital, there is approximately $24 million of unencumbered funds to support future projects. And last but not least, the board's current priorities are shown here on the slide. Always exciting when priorities get to the implementation stage, which is the case with the long-term care facility. For project 3, the board's desire to increase grant support for those more rural health clinics. Staff continues to have conversations with the province around named facilities. And lastly, discussions regarding the community health hub are ongoing. Finance will be conducting further analysis once the facts become known. So this includes a surety around the overall costs for the long-term care facility, as well as further detail on what the health hub project is going to look like. We'll, of course, be looking to optimize the reserves that we have, along with the use of some debt. As I think you're all aware as well, we feel that we will be able to continue to manage those projects along with our existing operations within the $12.6 million in tax requisitions that's collected currently. This takes me to the options and recommendations. However, I do believe that the presentation from Island Health will come forward at this time, and we can come back to this when they're done.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Are we asking our Island Health colleagues to go to the podium?
Lucy, certainly, but they can also help.
Just before the Island Health starts, are there any questions from directors for Lucy? We'll first go to Director Grieve.
Just a comment. It sure is nice to see interest revenue of over $500,000 at today's rates. It's nice to be going in that direction for a change. So that's the good side of interest rates.
Thanks. And Director Sinnott.
Yes, thank you. And maybe it's also for the health authority people. In the overall budgeting, we have various, the Comox Valley foundations and the Campbell River Hospital foundations that provide funding for a number of equipment items. I'm just wondering what the overall policy is in terms of their funding and how it affects the fungibility of allocations of funds overall between the various different health districts. In other words, if someone is raising significant amount of funding in Campbell River to provide for the various projects, how does that flow into the budgeting decisions that we're looking at today and then the eventual tax rates?
Okay, interesting question. I'm looking around to see if anybody's jumping up with the answer. Here we have Dave. If you can press the button and
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and directors. I can certainly field that question in advance. So you're quite right.
sorry, Dave, can you just first introduce yourself? My apologies for not doing it, but you'll remember all the details better than I will.
I should have done so. So apologies to Chair and directors. I'm Dave Boychuk. I lead capital management for Island Health. They call me Executive Director of Capital Management, Financial Projects, and P3s. That last part is quite relevant here in the Valley because both the hospitals here in Comox Valley and Campbell River are P3 facilities. And all of our capital treasury as relates to the foundations, which is the question posed by the director, sit with me. So I'm very pleased to be with you here this morning, along with colleagues. To your question, yes, we work with the foundations in several different ways. Part of it is routine, and so maybe that's the best part to speak of. Our overall budget for what we call sustainment capital, which is what we're talking about here. And that's apart from major capital, which today here we're fortunate to talk about in terms of the long-term care facility. But for sustainment capital, our overall budget for that is about $80 million a year. Of that, 10 million comes from our foundation partners. Now, sometimes that's more or less, and we depend on that in the mix of that $80 million. So we get about 43 from the province, and there's significant contributions from the regional hospital districts here as well. That's what makes up our funding. So we do depend on that routine funding, and that stays in the community in which it's generated. And when we have foundations that have either targeted fundraising or other fundraising that they want to bring over and above that composite 10 million, we bring that into the budgeting, which changes the allocation of that sustainment capital in that particular region. If that's helpful to the director.
thanks very much. And we also have a question from Director Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to the capital approved capital equipment under and over $100,000. And my question is, how are these projects determined? How do they get on the list? How do we decide which ones to fund and which ones not to fund?
Thanks for that. And I think Dave can respond to that as well.
Again, so Director Chapman, we have an extensive process for this that we engage in annually. And it starts generally, well, we've already started it. We run it on a 12-month continuous basis. So right now we're in the process of working with all of the unit level for our care operations, and they surface a set of needs, and that goes into a large database. Just so you know, the total population of need in that database exceeds $800 million. So that's the sort of total pool that we're operating from of sustainment capital for those over and under 100K projects that you're making mention of. We then, once we have surfaced all of the need, we go through quite a rigorous prioritization process, and that's led out of my portfolio. And we start, as we're doing now, at the unit level and identifying what the unit level's total prioritization of all of those things that they brought forward are. We then go forward to the level of essentially programs and repeat that with program leadership. When that prioritization is done to get down from that 800 million to 80, it goes to the level of our vice president portfolios to prioritize internal. And then we go through it once more at the prioritization of how do those set of priorities then relate across the portfolio? Do we think that the weighting is right across Island Health's full spectrum of business? Once we've settled that with our CEO and vice presidents, we take that to the board for their approval. And then ultimately that is what generates that list that comes to you for your consideration in January.
Thanks for that. And Director Kerr.
Thank you. And at the risk of having some of the members around the table fall off their chair hearing me ask this question, I feel compelled to ask staff about the unallocated reserve balance and how it relates to this year's proposed tax requisition. So $12.6 million tax requisition this year is about 150 to 250 per household. And we have a reserve balance of 24 million. At the municipalities, at the CVRD and on the various boards, we keep trying to find ways to save money, reduce the tax increases, and every $20 or $30 increase for a turf field or whatever it is we get pushback on, and we end up not going through with some of these very important projects. Here I see a budget with a very healthy reserve and dutifully created over the years from sound fiscal management. And I'm wondering if this is the one place where we could give residents in both districts a bit of a break this year. So my question is, if we didn't have any tax requisition, let's say it was zero this year, what would that what would the implications be for the budget? My assumption it would be more long-term borrowing later on for these big capital projects like the hub and the long-term care facility and others. But I'm just wondering if that is something that we could do for the citizens in the short term.
Thanks for the question, Director Kerr, and through the chair. And I'll start with an answer, and others may want to jump in a little bit. It's a really good question. The question that new to the hospital district and how it works financially and whatnot. I've asked those kinds of questions along the way as well. We always want to be at a place where you're not overtaxing, right? But first and foremost, I think we all are well aware of how costly hospital infrastructure is, and some of those figures have come out again in some of the answers you've heard so far. So that was one thing that was considered as well. Just historically, going back, the tax requisition was higher, and it was brought back down to $12.6 million over the last number of years as the board has these new strategic priorities there for longer term new capital infrastructure that's coming on. Our financial analysis that we've conducted was around maintaining this $12.6 million in taxation coming in. And by doing that, we feel we've been able to maintain a good balance between the debt and reserve funds in order to pay for those really, in essence, two very large new capital infrastructure projects out there. And we're able to manage that going forward, those two projects, and keep within that $12.6 million. One thing for me that's really important for citizens is that we are not on an up and down yo-yo type look of taxation and reduced taxation and then increased taxation. So always like to be able to keep that very level as you're going forward. So currently, in our current analysis, $12.6 million is keeping that level for the community. As we go forward and early days in some of these projects, that will one reason why we'll keep doing that analysis. So when we come back here next year and we're that much further along potentially on what the community hub project looks like, then we will recalculate, and maybe there is opportunity to bring that down a little bit. At this point, we would say our analysis tells us that 12.6 million is the figure. And you see, we are going to do our best. Grateful that we updated our investment policy, because we're going to try to make that money that we have sitting there in reserves work for us as well. So we've picked up some good investments over this last real high period of time where interest rates are high, and that's going to super help us as you go to the future as well. So I don't know if there's anything else that either Kelly or James wants to add.
Yeah, Mr. Warren is CAO is going to add something.
Thanks, and thanks, Lucy. I think that's a good description of that analysis to consider those future requirements around providing some funding for these projects from either reserves or from borrowing. And I was just going to add that during the strategic planning sessions from the previous term that landed on these three priorities, certainly there was consideration about the existing unallocated reserves and about the tax level, and so there was some movement on that, but certainly a recognition of the very high cost of infrastructure and investments and maintaining what we currently have, but also looking to the future with whatever that future might be, and long-term care and the hub were the two primary outcomes of that work. And I think the board at the time certainly recognized the importance of having funds to be able to take on these important tasks, and in partnership with Island Health as well, certainly.
So, sorry, I one more point for you to consider, and Kelly reminds me as well. And of course, as local government, one of the things we absolutely have to have in our budgets is enough money coming in to cover the debt. So the current debt load right now, the servicing on the debt is $10.7 million. You also have this $1.85 million in minor equipment that gets funded every year. So there's not a whole lot more room in that requisition to take care of the rest of the expenditures, and it just keeps funneling a small amount of money into reserves. Lots of what's built up in the current reserve is from previous years, in essence, and not a lot from the current structure in this budget right now.
Thanks very much. We'll take one more question and then turn it back to our Island Health colleagues for presentation. Director Joliker.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, question for staff, just building on Director Kerr's comment. That's where my mind was going to, so I'm glad that he got there. But my question less around perhaps decreasing the requisition, but we have this 3 million in surplus from this year. We have a fair bit of savings from our operations, which is a great thing. I think that's a great thing that we could talk to the public around ways that we're trying to cut costs. But I'm wondering if using the surplus could be a way to address decreasing the tax burden on residents this year. And I also want to recognize that, yes, we have the long-term financial analysis that we spent some time in strategic planning going over, that speaks to the community health hub and also to the additional 6 new facilities. We still haven't heard back on that, and it doesn't look like there's been much movement on the community health hub. So I think those are some contextual pieces that could be considered here if we're thinking about maybe seeing if there's a way for us to reduce the tax burden this year. But I'd love to hear around the surplus and the usage of surplus to decrease the tax burden this financial cycle.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. As it indicates in the report, the surplus is $3.3 million. From operations, it's just under 1.5, so 1,467,000. Part of that surplus is carry forward dollars for minor equipment. So it's in essence, what's the new added money? The new added money that's going to go to reserves for the unallocated piece is $1.4 million. Can you use that to reduce taxations? You could. It's totally to the discretion of this board. Is it something that I would recommend? And I would say no. It's really highly recommend your surpluses. This can be very much one time, and it's never a good thing to rely on one-time revenue in balancing off your budgets. It's great. You got extra money, goes into our reserves. Do you structure your budget on counting on those dollars? And I would say that's one thing that best practice from a financial perspective would tell us to stay away from, right? Because it's a really good return that we got. Interest rates are not going to be as high as they have been over 2024. So that type of surplus is not going to be ongoing in future years. So as keeping things stable going forward, I recommend not relying on the surplus. Secondly, as I'm saying, it's your option to do that. And what that could look like if you did use that surplus to reduce the taxation is for your homeowners, they'll get a one-time break, for example. And that's okay, but just knowing that likely to the future, that's going to have to go up again. So they'll see a break and then it'll go up again and maybe go up again. So those are my thoughts around that.
Thanks very much, Lucy, and we'll turn it back to Dave and the presentation from Island Health.
Thank you, Chair and Directors. For the next part, we'll speak to you about the long-term care facility that's being developed in Campbell River. To that end, I have a number of colleagues with me. I think many of you are familiar with Mac Jessic, who's the Executive Director in this region. Also, Emily Pridham, who will speak to you on the presentation. And Emily is our Director of Capacity Development and Planning. Planning and Development, sorry, for long-term care and assisted living, and Troy Lakin, who is our project director on this particular project. So I'll turn that over to Emily with your thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here and share about the long-term care program in Campbell River. Can everyone hear me okay? I've gotten out of practice speaking in microphones all these years on Teams. I'll speak a little bit about the long-term care program itself and what we hope to achieve through adding these beds in Campbell River. And Troy will talk a little bit more about the build itself. So we'll share the presentation today. Trying to figure out which button to push. That would be wonderful. Thank you. So this is the vision and the mission for the long-term care program at Island Health. And ultimately our vision for everyone in long-term care, whether they're staff or residents, volunteers, physicians, is that we make every moment matter for each person. Our mission is a vibrant and innovative long-term care community that nurtures and inspires hope, choice, and meaning. So a little bit about long-term care in Campbell River right now. There are 5 long-term care homes in the Campbell River area and about 298 funded long-term care beds, including the North Island beds as well. The project that we are moving forward with will add 153 new long-term care beds to the long-term care system in the area, which you can see is a significant increase to the capacity. A little bit about long-term care. People who live in long-term care are those who can no longer be cared for at home or in assisted living. Long-term care residents tend to have severe behavioral issues on a continuous basis, cognitive impairment or physical dependencies that necessitate their care being provided in an environment with 24/7 nursing. Our residents are clinically complex medical needs that require that round-the-clock nursing care. So as we've worked on the business case for the project, as we've proceeded through starting to work on the projects, we've been doing some engagement with our staff, our residents and families to really understand what matters to them and help us achieve these visions for what we hope the long-term care home will look like and feel like for those who live there and those who work there. So I'll just read these out to you. The slide's a little bit wordy, but it really speaks to what we hope to achieve on these projects. So first, the long-term care home will enable residents to have freedom of movement while ensuring their safety. The design will maximize independence and support feelings of comfort and inclusion. Accessibility is paramount. We want to support health, well-being, inclusion, and connection to the community through activities and recreation. Residents will have a flow to their days with various ways to recreate in familiar and functional spaces. Spaces will be home-like and adaptable to technology today and in the future. And then finally, we envision care homes that provide warm, inclusive, and inviting spaces where the sights and sounds of food lend to a sense of home, health, and connection. So these vision statements are driven directly from the engagement we've been doing with our staff and with some of our residents. Yeah. So the engagement that we've done, the research that we've done are driving some of what we consider the must-have design principles for the long-term care homes that we'll be building. Long-term care or Island Health operates 17 homes ourselves. We have contracts with lots of other operators on the island, so we have extensive experience and lesson learned that we're drawing from and thinking about how to design and operate the new long-term care home. We've been really inspired by some of the principles of dementia villages that you may have heard of here in the Comox Valley and also internationally. And really the dementia villages are grounded on home-like environment with a lot of access to the outdoor spaces. So this is something that we want to incorporate in all the projects. We're looking at within the care homes having hubs where residents and families and staff can come together to have a cup of coffee, a hair salon, a therapy gym, these kind of things. And we're excited that the resident rooms will be private with ensuite washrooms, large windows for the residents. This is something we hear time and again when people talk about what they look for in long-term care. It's that sense of both privacy, a place where they can live their own lives, and also a place for community where they can connect with others. The houses themselves will have living rooms, activity rooms, dining rooms, and they'll balance the need of quality life for their residents with the diverse needs of care needs and operational efficiency for our staff. And then finally, to give you a little sense of the 3 projects we have underway right now, because Island Health does have approval to proceed to design, build, and operate 3 new long-term care homes on the island. You can see in Campbell River, 153 beds. Nanaimo, we have 306, and in Colwoods on the South Island, 306 as well. All of these will include a suite of adult day programs, hospice, and then we're really excited at the inclusion of child daycare in each of these. So each of the homes will have an on-site child daycare, which is one of the pieces we're really excited about. And I think at this point, I'm turning it over to Troy. Let's see what the next slide is. We go to the next slide, Dave? Yes. Okay, so I'll turn it over to my colleague, Troy. Oh,
Morning, everyone. My name's Troy Lyken. I'm project director, and I'll be looking after the Campbell River and the Lanceville and Nanaimo sites. I have a peer that'll be looking after the other one in Colwood. As we kind of move forward with the presentation, so we put this up here for for information for everyone. So we identified the western communities, Colwood, Nanaimo, Lanceville, and then also the Campbell River site as to a location where it will be situated on the site as we move through it. Kind of gives a little bit of information in regards to the size of the lot of the site, which is about 4 acres, slopes about 4.5 meters. So it'll be a little challenging, but it's a good spot for the long-term care site as we move forward. Kind of alignment across the projects. Before I get into that, I guess what I wanted to do is just kind of give you kind of a snapshot as to where we are at. As Emily alluded to, we have all the projects have been approved and are moving forward with functional programming and design. We've recently hired a prime consultant who will be looking after all 3 of the projects as a consultant aspect. We are looking at, we started our functional programming and schematic design it's currently in its infancy at this point, but we started in early January and are moving forward with it. As we kind of move forward with the whole process, we've sent out an RFP for construction managers for all 3 sites. They're closing kind of staggered just to kind of make sure that the market was available to bid on each and all sites as we move forward. So Campbell River will be the first one that will be closing for the construction manager, and that will be in March. And then following with Lanceville would be April, and then May would be Colwood as we move forward. And what that entails is we onboard the construction manager to dive into the design with the consultants as well as our project team as we move forward. And in regards to our project team, what we've done is we're building a team for all 3 sites that will carry out the project. And that counts within that is working groups for clinical programs, municipal programs, Indigenous engagement programs, Indigenous communities, as we're kind of moving forward. So again, it's in its infancy at this point, but we're starting to move forward. We're starting to reach out to our working groups now to move all forward as we go. So back to this slide, the alignment across the projects. So we're promoting alignment and standardization for design, construction, operations. So that's essentially why we went with the super bid, I guess we could call it. The prime consultant will be overseeing the design aspects, and we will be working with them just to make sure that everything falls in line with what we're looking for in the end goal for the long-term care sites, as Emily alluded to in regards to the housing in the neighborhoods and dementia villages and whatnot. So as we kind of move forward, long-term care program expects the operation of the 3 new homes to either align with current best practices in owned operated homes or set the course for operations in owned operated homes as we kind of go through it. As we go through the design and working with the working groups, there will be a few slight changes, I guess, as we kind of go forward, just to make sure that we have, ensure that we have best care for our residents in our community. And this is kind of a concept. Well, it's not kind of a concept. It is a concept. It was created, basically there was a business case created about 3 years ago, 3 years ago, somewhere around there. It was a very comprehensive study. And as part of that, this is what the concept came out for Campbell River. The way it's shaped is there's a few things, reasonings for that in regards to sight lines and access and whatnot. But there was also like the helicopter flight path as well to kind of lend it to this design at this point. This is just a concept at this point. We're working with our architecture prime consultant as well too, so it may change slightly as we're kind of moving forward, but the basic concept is what it is right there. So we'll have, of course, main entrance, house and neighborhood groups, central village square, variety of courtyards and outdoor space, childcare space, and underground parking as well. And this is kind of a snapshot of a project timeline. So business plans were approved 2023. Building the project team has been ongoing since last spring. We're building up the team as we go. We're just putting in the last few components in the next month, somewhere around there, for the moving forward for the project as we kind of move forward, just in regards to building our team. I just wanted to mention that we are hiring a communications consultant, which should be as part of our team, which will be carrying out monthly reports, and we'll be keeping everyone appraised of progress and whatnot. And then what that looks like in the end, it would be on social media, things like that, just to keep everybody appraised of the situation and in the progress of the builds. Right now we're in the procurement stage. Essentially, we've hired the prime consultant, the procurement, we're hiring the construction manager, and now we're looking at, is kind of in conjunction with that, we're hiring architectural consultants, environmental consultants and whatnot, just to refresh everything, just to make sure that nothing's misstep. There's no missteps or anything like that as we go through the project. So as we move forward, design construction, that's where we are in that circle there. So we're starting with fundamental programming, design as well. As we kind of move forward through it, we're looking at around the 2027 timeline for opening and operating at that point. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Troy and Emily and Dave. And are there any questions or comments from directors? Director Morin.
Hi, thank you, Chair. My question is more around the inclusion of the childcare spaces, and I was just curious whether inclusion of the childcare space was going to, if there was going to be any cross pollination in terms of programming with the senior, or sorry, with the long-term care residents and the young ones.
What a wonderful question. Absolutely, our hope and our aspiration would to have intergenerational programming between the child daycare. Yeah, there's so much benefit that we've seen throughout the province, other jurisdictions, other countries where we have different generations having programs on the same site. So we have a lot to do to figure out exactly how to do it, but as a vision, like having child daycare on site with the people living in the home, there's so many opportunities for things like meals together, story programs, activities. Like, yeah, there's so much benefit that we see from that potential intergenerational programming, and absolutely would be looking at how we do that.
That's just wonderful news. I know there's so many grandparents who don't have grandchildren around, or vice versa. So that's great. I know with the Wache Friendship Center, with the new elders housing that's going in beside Wache, Wache also runs a daycare, and they're looking at doing some multi-generational programming as well. So kudos. I love this this addition. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Morin, and Director Deck. You're on mute, Director. You're on Director Deck. You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. I agree. That would be a wonderful addition to the care home. And I'm sure my mother would agree too. So carry on. Thank you.
Thanks very much to you and your mother. Any further questions from or comments from directors? Okay, thanks very much for that presentation. And Dave, do you have more to move on to?
Nothing further from us, Chair, just a word of thanks through you, Chair, to the directors and the board.
Thanks very much. It's really good to hear the progress that's being made and the timelines that you're working with. So thanks so much for being with us today and sharing that. So we are on the recommended budget and we've been on receipt. We'll dispense with that now. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that is carried. And we do have a recommendation that the 2024 recommended budget be adopted as presented. Would anyone care to move that?
Let's put it on the table. I'll move that.
Moved by Director Grieve. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Director Kerr. Discussion, Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was assuming that those questions were pertaining to the LTC. I definitely have questions to the other pieces of this recommendation and the budget. And so in the budget, in the package on the budget, there's a fair bit of correspondence from Island Health, particularly around, my questions are around the community hub in the letter dated January 15th to our CAO. On the second page, Island Health indicates 3 project names, and I haven't seen that nomenclature before when we've been talking about the priorities of this board. And so I'm just wondering if we can have some clarification. On page 2 of that letter, it speaks to urgent primary and community care, restorative health, primary care, and in the update, it says possible future project. And I will just say a few times throughout both the staff reports and the correspondence from Island Health, there's a fair bit of language that speaks to possible or proposed. And it is my understanding that the project as it relates to the hub is a project that has been decided on and is part of our capital plan. And so I just would like some clarification if there's any further contextual pieces that we should be made aware of from Island Health around the viability of that project, if it's still being brought forward. There's language here around affordability. So a few questions related to the letter here. Thanks.
Thanks. And we'll go back to Dave.
Thank you, Chair and Director. I'm happy to speak of, and I'll address the question as I understand it. And if I'm not speaking to what you would like, Director, please do point me in the right direction. As to the hub, that is definitely moving forward. We are actively engaged both with Mr. Warren and other colleagues here at the staff level, as well as our own internal functional programming to make sure that we're aligned in what we need as Island Health in that hub space, as well as what's feasible. And that's the affordability language you're seeing in the letter. Is what we learned from our engagement publicly is that there's essentially no limit to the number of people that would like to be involved, the number of groups that would like to be involved in the hub. We also don't have resource capacity to build something in large enough to accommodate 100% of the desire for co-location. So that's the language you're seeing about affordability. We're absolutely working on this. The planning team that is part of my portfolio is active on this every day. So this is a routine part of our planning.
And the nomenclature, the language that's on the letter, the references to restorative health, primary care, urgent primary care, and community care as projects, is that the community hub?
So no. So well, yes and no, I suppose is the answer, Director. The urgent and primary care centers are part of an overall primary care strategy that we're working with the province on. It is something that we are doing in a temporary location in this region in the Comox Valley here. It is something that we need to do and would like to expand from that temporary spot. So it is part of the discussion around, is it possible and functionally feasible to locate the UPCC along with what we're calling the hub for this point? So that's not a finalized discussion just yet, Director, but the UPCC will proceed regardless of location.
Okay, just as a follow-up to that, that's great. And we, Director Hillian and I are on a committee with the division, so we are aware of that work. So thank you for pushing that forward. We need that in the Comox Valley. I guess it's the first time I've seen it at this board that these three items are something that Island Health is looking for cost sharing for us. So if you can speak to, because on our plan, it's the hub, it's the long-term care, and it's the community sites. So these three projects is the intent for Island Health to come to this board to ask for cost sharing for those three projects.
In terms of the hub, we're looking and working with staff on a fairly unique model, and we've have some experience with that in capital region as well, because our capital envelope as Island Health sets itself is not sufficient to do a scale of hub that is being talked about here. So I would stop short of calling it cost sharing and say that we are working with the district, the regional hospital district, on a relatively novel cost sharing arrangement that we're just not positioned to talk about yet.
Thanks very much. And we have a question
Sure.
from,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Mr.
Sorry,
Warren.
and maybe just an observation there in nomenclature, as you mentioned. In future reference, perhaps we could be noting the hub itself, and in this particular letter, it doesn't actually name the hub. It does name long-term care, and certainly the hospital board has named the hub as an additional priority. So just to ensure that we keep that on the radar, we can certainly reflect the two priorities that the hospital board has identified in that partnership with Island Health going forward.
Equally, we'll be mindful of the nomenclature going forward.
Thanks for those helpful clarifications. Director Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to understand this budget, filling in for Councillor Therrien or Director Therrien. So who's responsible after the capital build happens? Who's responsible for operating and asset management? And do we have a life cycle cost plan for these projects?
In respect of the hub, Director?
I know all of the capital projects. I just don't understand that division, like who's responsible for operating and maintaining the asset after it's built?
Island Health is, Director.
Okay, thank you so much. And so do we get those asset management plans coming through this board? And when would they come for a new build like that? Does that happen after, before, during?
Because operating costs are part of Island Health's ordinary business and not something that's shared with the regional hospital districts, we don't ordinarily bring those forward to the board, Director.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I'm looking around and don't see any further questions. Oh, Diane McKay from Island Health online. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for having to join late this morning. Through the chair, I did just want to articulate that we have in previous correspondence to the regional hospital district have identified the potential projects for integrated and urgent primary care and restorative health in past correspondences as well. But the point is taken regarding the nomenclature, and we will revisit that for future letters. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. And just for those who don't know you, could you just please clarify your role?
Of course. I'm the Director of Capital Planning, Real Estate and Leasing with Island Health. So I work with Dave in the overall capital management portfolio.
Thanks very much. All right, no more speakers. The resolution, the recommendation is on the floor. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Director Deck, I saw your hand go up. Did that mean in favor or opposed? Are there any opposed? All right, I don't see any. I'm going to call that passed. And thanks very much, financial staff, Lucy, and your crew, and our Island Health colleagues for that presentation. And we'll move on to item number 2, the resolution status report from February 2024. A motion for receipt, please. Moved Greaves, seconded Grant. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone? Oops, Director Joliker.
The button. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just obviously my passion is the hub. The item from almost a year ago, just it says execution of the MOU still outstanding. I'm wondering if staff can speak to a timeline that we're thinking that might actually be finalized. Yeah, it's been a year now that we've assigned this, so just wondering where we're at with that. Other than we're in conversation, is there any indication when we might see that come forward?
Thanks, Director. Yeah, the MOU itself, we are still looking to finalize that, but I can assure the board that the staff, Dave and company, have been having good discussions to talk about the types of services, the space requirements, the needs, as well as those other community type services. And those conversations have been happening not just with Island Health and ourselves, but also with some other municipal partners. And the work itself is underway. The MOU itself is still to be executed. And I know Dave and I've had a conversation on that a couple of times over the past couple of months. But Dave, if you got anything more to add, either on the hub conversation itself or just on that MOU.
I'll address direct. Thank you, Chair and James, and I'll just shoot in the director. Well, it seems like we're slow in the framework. Mr. Warren has correctly identified. There's quite a lot of work going on. The MOU, it's important to us that once we finalize the functional plan for what the hub will look like and figure out how the financing mechanism works, that we reflect that in the MOU. That's the delay in bringing the MOU. It is not a delay in the work itself.
Thanks very much. No further comment. Is there anyone opposed to the receipt of the resolution status report? That is carried. Thank you. And we're moving to bylaws and resolutions. And we have the recommendation that bylaw number 302, being annual budget bylaw, be given first and second readings concurrently. Moved by Grant, seconded by Mawhinney. Any discussion? Director Joliker.
Yeah, thanks. Just because I didn't see the detail of it in the documentation from Island Health, but we're dealing with a lot of different crises in our community, and I was happy to see that we're funding a psychiatric bed. So I'm just wondering if Island Health can clarify if that's at Campbell River or Comox Valley, and is that the hard asset? Is that the funding of that bed? Otherwise, everything else looks good to me. Thanks, Chair.
Dave's making another trip to the podium.
Thank you, Chair. To the director, the simple question is, it's the hard asset. So we don't come to the regional hospital districts for operational funding. That's a matter for us in the province. So it is the physical asset, and I can bring it to you as an undertaking as to which hospital off the top of my head. I apologize, I do not know.
Thanks for that. No further questions. So we have the recommendation on the floor for first and second reading. Is there anyone opposed? That is carried, and we'll move by Grieve, seconded by Grant, that bylaw number 302, annual budget, be read a third time. Any discussion? And there's none. Is there anyone opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We'll move on to the recommendation for bylaw number 303, Strathcona Regional Hospital District Capital Expenditures bylaw number 303, 2024. Moved by Grant, seconded by Cole Hamilton, that the bylaw be given first and second reading. Any discussion? Oh, over to Lucy.
Thank you through the chair. If we could, we would just ask that one amendment be made to this bylaw. So under number 1, where we are listing the capital expenditures in total of $1.97 million. Really, in essence, we should only have the first 2 bullet points there. And I would just like to remove bullet number 3, where it says new long-term care facility, $2,074,000. That's included in the other bylaw. We don't need that there. Sorry about that.
I just want to clarify if we can do that without an amendment, if it's agreeable to the mover and seconder. Is there anyone opposed to that being included in the original motion as agreed by the mover and seconder? Okay, so we have the motion on the floor with that change as noted. Further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is carried. Moved by Grant, seconded by Grieve, that the bylaw be read a 3rd time. Is there any discussion? Okay, we shall vote. Is there anyone opposed? Looks like there are none, so that is carried. Thank you very much. We have no new business addendum media questions, so that remains with one thing to deal with. Thank you, Director Grant, seconded by Director Mawhinney. Anyone opposed? That's carried. We are terminated. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your engagement this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.